Interestingly, we have this Supreme Court case. So SCOTUS rules police cannot search homes without warrants in the name of community caretaking. This is unanimous. 9-0. So that's promising. Even the liberal justices were like, a cop can't go into your house without a warrant and take all your guns because they think you're ill or something. It's a good sign. But it's crazy to me that the argument is getting close to the red flag law stuff. And a lot of people, I guess right now, are like, oh, of course they can't they can't without a warrant. But what they've been actively trying to do is get a warrant claiming that you're unwell and then violating your rights.
Yeah. Disarming you through a subversive means. And I think it's according to the Geneva Convention, disarming a population is considered an act of war.
Wow.
As it should be.
I believe that somewhere it either is that or it's Karl von Clausewitz, but we haven't had a von Clausewitz in a while.
So you might know this, but what percentage of the time is a genocide preceded by removing guns from the general population? Because I was able to come up with more than one example to send to someone I was arguing with.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's 100%, but it's basically 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, because they are one and the same. And this is how you think about tyranny. So we often think, or the thing is oftentimes said something like, well, if you disarm a population, then you will have genocide, or then you'll have some sort of massive, massive tragedy, horrible authoritarian argument. And so we use it as this argument of like the one begets the other. I don't think that's the right way to think about it. The rather is the act of because that, I'm sorry, I don't think it's the right way to think about it, because it creates an opportunity for someone to say, we won't do it this time. We won't, okay, we'll take away your guns, but we won't genocide you this time. Like that's, you're essentially holding your entirety of your existence and your hope on the fact that they won't do something. Whereas what I think the better way to think about it is the act of taking the firearms away from somebody is wrong in the exact same way as it is to target a population in that way. Well, one doesn't beget the other. They fall in the same vein.
You need to understand that if the Earth is to join the Galactic Federation, we can't have a bunch of crazies with guns who are going to shoot the aliens when they show up. So they got to disarm us for the sake of the Galactic Federation, right?
Your condescension is coming through.
Wow, no, I'm just being ridiculous. No, I'm just kidding. What it is, it's a bunch of elites who would lie to the general public to protect themselves and their family. They would tell you there's no gas shortage, so they can go buy gas before you can. They would tell you that everything's fine. There's tons of toilet paper, so they can buy it up before you can. They would buy a bunch of stock while serving in Congress and then pass regulations on these companies which benefit their stock decisions, their trading decisions. And they would come out and say, you can't own weapons because safety. Now, for me, I've got 5 armed guards around me at all time, paid for by your tax dollars.
Yeah, and
no guns for you.
We saw this last year. The exact same people that were arguing to defund the police spent millions of dollars making sure they had very armed people protecting their house. And and it's like, and you can't look at that and say, oh, that's funny. You should look at that and go like appalled by that. Even the people who voted for these.
We do, man. I mean, the people who watch a show like this. Probably most conservatives, we are appalled by that, but there is a large faction in this country of extremely ignorant tribal individuals who have no idea what's going on. I posted this on Facebook. I said, what happened to all those people who used to come in my mentions and just like promote Joe Biden and rag about Trump? They're all gone. All gone. You know why? Because they never cared about Biden.
No, because you bought guns? Now you're a bad conservative man? No,
back during the election, all of these people I knew who cared nothing for politics, never did, all of a sudden were like, oh, Biden, we had to vote for Biden. We must do it. And then Biden gets elected and they're gone. They no longer care about Trump. They no longer care about Biden. They don't care about politics. Now they post about stupid nonsense. And I'm like, I thought, what about all those things you were... So what happens is these people now have voted for a man who is, by like every objective metric, failing. And I love these op-eds where they're like, Biden's had the best 100 days of any president ever. And I'm like, yeah, if your head's in the toilet, you're not paying attention. But a lot of these people just walked away anyway. So now things are getting worse. And too many of these people vote for trash laws and leave us worse off for it. I don't know how you solve for that, unless like Starship Troopers or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, in order to vote, you must prove ownership of a firearm.
Yeah,
I mean, then you'd at least have skin in the game. It's meant to be facetious, but it does get the point across.
Mandatory gun ownership.
I mean, we don't. the problem with containing something a vote like this is it's not a very complicated problem. It's that who gets to choose, right? This is essentially the question of all power like this.
Thank you.
Who gets to choose,
That's
right?
the question.
So if you make it, one of the arguments that comes up is something like, we don't want people who are mentally, thankfully for the Supreme Court case that you were talking about, we want to make sure, at least to some extent, people of certain mental issues don't own firearms, right? We kind of want to, there's this sort of, let's take the question honestly and look at it that way. Yes, that's true. Who gets to choose? Big question.
It is an interesting point because I've brought up several times, the Second Amendment doesn't say the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed unless you're mentally ill.
Yeah, I know. And it is a problem. Like, it is a legitimate mental problem. Or you say, like you were arguing about, if you do the time, if you pay your debt to society, you should have your rights restored. So
a good point was made to me, though, that the Constitution does allow for rights to be restricted after or only through due process.
Only through due process.
So in mental deficiency, I believe, through due process, then all right, I understand that argument. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if I own a bunch of guns, and then there's a claim filed against my mental health, and we go and there's a legal process, and then after determining I'm unwell, then they come and take everything.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense to me. I'm still worried about it because mental health is not objective.
It's an ambiguous category. In some ways, it is viewed as an ambiguous category.
Oh, yeah.
So some guy can just be like, I was looking at Ian and he is crazy. My professional experience is that he is crazy and dangerous.
Dude.
And then the judge is like, I agree, seizes guns.
Anyone that's got like a medical marijuana card for stress or any kind of psychological issue could then be deemed like unwell and unfit to hold a gun. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, you can't buy a gun if you smoke pot, right?
Well, you're not supposed to. So can and should are different questions. There is there is a question on the 4473 that asks, are you currently or are you consuming illegal substances? And it's and the 4473 is a federal document. And
straight up, if you smoke pot, you can't buy a gun.
So technically speaking, if you are committing a very big crime, if you are currently consuming marijuana, not like smoking it at the gun shop, but I mean, that's...
No, but not technically, literally.
You are
the federal government literally says you are committing a crime if you consume these things. Hunter Biden did it.
Yep.
It's freaking crazy, man.
Yeah,
Schedule 1 narcotic marijuana.
That makes no sense.
What the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, there's a parallel that's kind of coming through in the world, and this is kind of begging the question, but there's the joke, who won the war on drugs? Weed won the war on drugs, right? It's kind of a humor. And how did weed win the war on drugs? Mass non-compliance.
Yeah.
Which you could also look at that in a sort of philosophical sense. It was self-reliance. Well, the government's not going to let me have my weed, so I'm going to get it myself. The government's not going to allow me to protect my family, so I'm going to figure it out myself.
It's time to end the war on guns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But how do you do it? And for us, we're doing it through culture. We're doing it through going out and doing things. We have our publications, and what do we get for it? We get pulled off of newsstands.
Really?
Yep. We've had our magazine. Anything gun related has been pulled off of newsstands. No one talked about it. You didn't see a giant New York Times post.
When Google bans Gundam Wing because it's got gun in the name, you know they really don't like guns.
But how are we being self-reliant? Here's a good example. If you own a gun store, give us a call. We'll stock it in on your shelf, right?
There you go.
If you own a gun store, if you own an FFL, you get a hold of us. You can get a hold of us through our website, and we have a program to stock our magazines, because we've got 4 different magazines. Concealment, which is urban, smaller firearms, all about safety, concealed carry, making sure you're doing things the right way, being good at it. And then you've got Recoil, which is the main magazine. This is sort of the big news gun industry things. Maybe it's someone came out with something really innovative, or there's an advocate. We did Maj Touré. We put in,
he's
cool
dude.
So he's Maj Touré is doing something great. There's Chris Cheng is doing something great with AAPI Go. So we have those 2 magazines. Then we have Off Grid, which is much more focused on skills, survival. And it has, and I think of it, the advantage that Off Grid has, it has a lot of things about doing, right? So it's not just about gear, because a lot of survival, a lot of the negativity that comes from survivalist groups or preppers is they're just about buying stuff. It's the classic, heavily unfit person with a bunch of stuff is not going to survive the apocalypse, right? Yeah. And then the last one we have is Carnivore, which is all about high-end field to table
meat consumption.
Meat consumption, yep. So
I loathe to think about what's going to happen to these cities in the event that there's like an actual shutdown. The water shuts off. People are going to start dying of dehydration. They'll be drinking blood in a day.
Yeah, you'll have. I mean, historically speaking, you'll have a very short period of very, very ugly violence, and then you'll have a very long period of probable starvation.
Oof.
You know,
People fleeing like crazy in random directions.
well, and the solution is actually in itself. And I think the solution to this one is not just buying a bunch of stuff; it's actually community. I mean, the term community is thrown around a lot publicly right now, but the antidote to this classic idea of a guy in a basement with a bunch of bullets and a bunch of food is that he's going to die alone. What is prison? It is living in a box for 30 years. You know, it's taking your life away. Life is time. So real survival, when we're talking about things like this, is actually 100% based on community, social interaction with people who you actually trust, that you can have them to protect you from making mistakes that you would otherwise not know. Right? So someone who knows water, someone who knows ecology, someone who knows, hey, don't eat those plants. That's a simple form of it. A more complicated one is you're desperate. We know each other. We take care of each other. We're not waiting for the government to come and save us.
It's actually quite remarkable how people in cities mostly, but basically everybody is extremely detached from the basic requirements of survival.
Yeah, I mean, Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a ultimatum, but
People, you take a person in the city and you put them in the woods, it's just not going to go well.
sure, because they have no reason to be adapted to the woods. If you live in an
Right.
urban environment your whole life, you're never going to need to adapt the abilities to do that. It's
Whoa,
a
whoa, no,
luxury.
you will need to adapt the abilities. It's likely at some point in your life you will need to understand basic survival, even if you live in a city. It's just that in their immediate, they don't.
That life has been kind to them to the extent that they've never been thrust in a situation like that. Sure, that's absolutely true. But I still want to return to the idea, like self-sufficiency is a good thing,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, when you have a neighborhood, like say, you live in a condo and you know your neighbors, it's not a bad thing to know your neighbors and being like, oh, I know such and such is a diabetic, and I can help them. I can help take care of them this way. It doesn't mean you're kicking down their doors and saying, here, take the insulin.
Right, but it's good. People don't realize how brutal it'll get if there's actual like power outages or like rolling blackouts even, let alone if the water shuts off or the electricity goes out for an extended period of time. People who are diabetic, you got to refrigerate that insulin. That's a huge problem for just storms going out. And they got to have generators usually to make sure the fridges keep running. But there's a lot of other things too. People's medications will spoil. If you got antibiotics in the fridge, they're gone. Vaccines go bad very, very quickly without electricity.
Yeah,
So hey, bring it on, Greta Thunberg. Let's turn off all the fossil fuel power plants and then see how long humans last, because they will start tearing each other's throats out as it gets bad.
Or they'll just build a pipeline and not tell you about it.
Pipeline?
A pipeline, yeah. If you tell people they can't have something and they need it, they'll figure out a way.
Look, one of the big themes of this is that they're going to tell you, oh, no, don't go buy this. Then they go rush out and buy it.
Sure.
They're coming out saying like, oh, the water is going to rise 20 feet. I'll take that beachfront condo on Miami Beach. How much is that? Water's rising? No, I don't care about that.
Yeah, sure. Ammunition prices are high right now. So if you're hoarding ammunition, it's kind of rude. But right? But the other thing about it too is, how about you just take seriously what you think you need? It's not more. Panic buying is a hard thing to define, and panic buying is what people do when they feel like they're insufficient with what they have.
It's interesting. I mean, Ian bought a ridiculous amount of flour for 2 years.
Yes. Yeah, I was surprised it was available because last July that it wasn't. You could get maybe 4 bags of flour.
So why buy so much flour?
Who knows what's coming in 2 months. I like to look ahead and rest easy.
You see, that's the thing. You're hoarding. Is it someone being prepared, or is it someone panicking?
Yeah, there's a good question to be said there. Or are you just a good businessman and you can buy better in bulk and you're going to be able to store it, and are you being proactive?
After the apocalypse, all the neighbors are going to be like, bread, and Ian's going to be like, I have the bread, and I go,
feed you all.
And he's going to like rip it and throw it to people, and they're going
Bread
to cheer.
for bullets, bread for water, dude. Feed the masses.
I don't think anyone would trade you bullets for bread. They only need one.
I'll let them go hunt, and I'll keep them healthy when they come
No, you don't
home.
understand.
Yeah.
That's
They
my
only
goal anyway.
they only need one.
Oh, well, that's a good point.
You grossly overestimate the accuracy of most people.
That's fair. That's fair.
Let's assume it's point blank. They don't need any, actually. They just need the weapon. Then most people would just capitulate. Just take whatever you want. Leave me alone.
Take my flour, take my bread.
Yeah, I mean,
Hire me.
But
violence
they-
is expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's costly to go do violence on someone is expensive. I mean,
What
we're not
about an
even talking-
apocalypse though?
It still is, right? So let's take the metaphorical post-apocalyptic apocalypse situation. You have your little tribe and they have their little tribe. For you to go attack their tribe, to try to take their stuff, you have to willingly acknowledge that if you lose, it's final.
Yeah.
Right? Or, or it's final, it's extremely costly.
Not just that, but if I go to Ian and I say, Ian, make me bread. And then Ian's like, in exchange for what? And I say, I'll trade you something. Then Ian's skill and value as a human being contributes to the production of bread. If you just go and take the flour, all right, well, now you got to make the bread.
Yeah.
So there's a cost you lose out. Trade is probably safer and easier for everybody. Sometimes trade just doesn't work, though, because starving person might not have anything to trade with.
A lot of times it's the language barrier. Fortunately, we have that going for us in the U.S. is it's easy to communicate relatively. We don't long-range communications with the power grid down would be a little bit more complex. Like how do you tell them that you're not a danger without getting close? That might be a challenge. You can kind of signal.
You gotta create a call.
I like ham radios, calls, bird calls. Those work.
Maybe like a
Yeah. Yeah, we can go back to classic bird sounds. I will lose at every time. They'll just be like, "Why is that man sounding like a chicken?"
But are we? Is this paranoia? I mean, are we just we're talking about all this stuff?
Well,
we're seeing the news, we're seeing gas prices, and we're like, oh, it's the end. But maybe not. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat. And we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.